And James chapter 1, and I want to just read one verse to you today, and it says, "My dear brothers," verse 19, "take note of this." How many have ever told someone, "Hey, now listen to this, what I have to say"? He says, "Take note of this." He says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." So we're supposed to be quick to listen. Everyone say quick to listen.
Quick to listen.
And slow to speak. How many like doing all the talking? Put your hand up. Come on, put them up. That's it. No, you're not. No, some of you are, some of you aren't. Okay, praise the Lord. But I want to read something to you today. And this is a little communication story. And it was at the turn of the century in Russia. And many small Jewish villages were being raided and burned to the ground by approval of the various governing authorities. The primary motivation was a religious persecution. One day, a leader of one of the small villages located between the Black Sea and the city of Kiev received word that their village was to be destroyed. However, accompanying the message was a note saying that if someone from the village would debate Father Andrew, I'm not even going to be able to say that Russian name, Belakovkas, who was the powerful religious leader and willingly knowing, he knows so much and has great debating skills. If someone from the village would debate Father Belikov and win, the city would be spared. When the village leaders read the note, their hearts sang, because they knew no one in the village could possibly debate. Nevertheless, felt obligated to call all the people together and tell them the impending doom that they were facing. Later that afternoon, everyone from the village gathered together at the synagogue, and Rabbi Yadin shared the bad news. An old man himself, and failing in health, he knew he was not much of a match for this clever wit of this Russian priest. Nevertheless, he felt impelled to ask everyone their thought and who could challenge the Father. A feeling of despair and dread had settled over the meeting, and suddenly one person stepped forward. To everyone's dismay, it was the town idiot. "What are you to do?" Now, the leaders began to say to one another, what's he going to do? "If we are to be destroyed, well, we will also suffer humiliation at the hands of this idiot." But the people began to raise their voices. "Are we not to die anyway?" At least the idiot was willing to try to save us. Should he not be given a chance? Although opposed to the idea, the leaders realized that they had no other alternative, so the challenge was accepted and the debate was scheduled for the next morning at noon. The night passed quickly and on to the next day. The people from the village gathered together, awaiting Father Belikov. Shortly after noon, Father Belikov arrived with a large battalion of Russian soldiers, all on horseback, armed and prepared to destroy the city. The Russian priest was dressed in a black robe. A cross decorated with jewels hung around his neck and on a golden chain. His face was sneering, and he scoffed at the crowd. Through his demeanor, excused such a powerful witness. Out of the crowd of the silent villagers, the idiot stepped forward, appearing. He was grinning from ear to ear as he made his way forward to the priest. "Is this the challenger?" The priest looked towards the village. They said nothing, but someone nodded their head. "Then let the debate begin," snapped the priest as he glared at the idiot in sudden disgrace. Without saying another word, the priest leaned forward, looked at the idiot, and raised 3 fingers in the air. Without hesitation, the idiot responded and raised 1 finger in the air. The priest stood up straight. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Then he looked towards the sky, and the priest took his finger and drew a large circle in the air. The idiot was no longer grinning. With a sense of force, he raised both hands as he made a cross in the air. The priest shook his head in disbelief. He turned and walked to his horse, Taking something from the leather bag, he returned and faced the idiot. In one hand, he had a large loaf of bread, and in the other, he had a silver chalice. He raised both towards the heavens. Again, without hesitation, the idiot ran over into the action. Reaching into his bag that he was carrying, he pulled out an apple and he began to eat it. The debate was over. The priest looked at the village leaders and turned towards the captain of the soldiers. Tell your men to return to Kiev. The city will be spared. The village people began to cheer and scream. Upon the return, the priest met with the ruler of government. How could you have lost this debate? The political officers asked. How is it possible? The priest responded, I have never met a man with skills and insight like this. I began the debate. I raised 3 fingers in the air representing the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But this man suddenly responded saying, yet God is one. Then I drew a large circle signifying God created the earth. But this pagan Jew made a sign of the cross indicating the new creation. And I then presented the elements of the Eucharist pointing to Christ's sacrifice. And without hesitation, the man pulled forth an apple signifying original sin and why the sacrifice was necessary. Never have I debated such a man. Meanwhile, back at the village, the people celebrated as the idiot shared how he won the debate. The idiot remarked, first the priest said, this town is going to be destroyed in 3 hours. And I said, not one person's leaving. Then he said, I will destroy the whole area. I said, you have to get to me first. And he says, well then, he decided he was going to take a break for lunch. I'm no idiot or dummy. I took the same response and ate my apple. So as the story comes to an end and the village was saved, but how much communication really took place in this story? Absolutely zero, isn't it? And that's what happens with a lot of people. A lot of people will do all the talking, but not a lot of listening happens. How many know I'm talking about here? A lot of talking, but not so much listening. Okay. How many people ever got hurt by something someone said to you? How many have ever had that happen? Okay. And then you go to that person and you say, you know, when you said this, oh, it hurt me so much. And the person looks at you, I didn't even mean it that way. How many have had that happen before? Yeah. We all have. That's why it's so important to talk to people that hurt us. That's why it's so important to have good communication skills. Okay? And that's what it's about. The number one reason for marriage ending in divorce is not a lack of sex. It's not money problems, but it's a lack of communication every time. Okay? The most important aspect of communication is not talking, but listening. Everyone see, quick to listen. Put your hand right on these two. I tell people you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You need to do twice as much listening as we do talking. Can you see that? Okay. You know, last week I talked about think before you talk. I talked about that last week. The Bible has a lot to say about communication, a lot to talk about. And James actually wrote this, and he had a great definition. You know, I read this thing, it said communication is 7% the words you speak, 38% the tone of your voice, okay, and 55% your body language. 55%. It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's just like if I go like this and say, oh, God loves you with a never-ending love. How much is that communicating? Not a whole lot, is it? Because my body language is stiff. My voice, my tone of my voice is harsh. The words are right, weren't they? But it didn't really communicate much. Oh, I just care about you so much. I mean, come on, does that really say I'm caring? No, it says I don't care at all. Okay? Communication is really important. Now, we need to listen with the right motives and the right attitudes. Everyone say right motives and right attitudes. Now, let's look at the book of Revelations. I want to show you something here today. And the first point I want to say is listen intentionally. Everyone say that together. Listen intentionally. Okay? Now, back in the book of Revelations, John wrote the book of Revelations, and he was writing to the seven churches in Asia. And he starts in chapter 2. And I just want to read the last part of these seven churches. He talks to Smyrna, he talks to Ephesus first off, and he talks to Philippi, and he talks about Laodicea. He talks to all these different churches, but every time at the end of what he tells them all different stuff, but at the end, look at chapter 2, verse 7. Look what he says here. He who has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And he says that to every church. Verse 7, verse 11, he talks to that church. Verse 17, verse 29, 3, verse 6, 3, verse 13, 3, verse 22. He keeps saying it over. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Whatever he told that church, that's what he said every time. And we have to have ears to hear. We have to intentionally listen to people. How many have unintentionally didn't want to hear someone, and all you're thinking about what you're going to do, and you're daydreaming, and the person's talking to you, and then they say, do you think you could do it? Oh, what'd you say? How many have ever done that? Besides me. Come on, we all do, right? We just don't intentionally listen to some people. And some people, all we hear is blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? But we need to intentionally listen to people when they talk, if you want to be a good communicator. Okay? Now, profitable listening does not just happen by accident. It has to be intentional. You have to learn to listen. You have to have ears to hear. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And see, God is always speaking. Okay, it's like a waterfall. He's always talking. But the problem is sometimes we just don't tune into hearing. And how many have ever had someone talking and you just don't tune into them? You know, they tell you, do this. Your boss will say, do this, and then do that, and then do this. And you say, I heard one of the do's, but I think I missed half of them. And then you got to go back to, now, what did you say? How did you say to do that? That's because you weren't intentionally listening. We need to intentionally listen, okay? God gave us, like I said, 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to listen twice as much as we speak, okay? And usually in communication, it's the reverse, isn't it? Isn't it the way it goes? We want to do all the talking. Well, they really need to hear me. They really need to understand what I'm saying. If I really tell them, they'll understand. And we do all the talking, but they don't listen. We don't listen, they don't listen. Next thing you know, you're in divorce court wondering how you got there, and you can't figure it out because no one's listening. Okay? Now, the number one reason for conflict is no communication or bad communication. That's the number one reason for conflict. When it comes to married couples, men like to avoid issues. How many know that? That's the way we are. We're wired. We just don't want any fighting. We want to avoid the issues. But you know what happens when we avoid the issues, guys? All kind of trouble happens. Okay? Every time, all kind of trouble happens. And women like to get upset when they feel like they're not heard. They really do. How many ladies like that? You get upset when you feel like you're not heard. Yeah. And why? Because you're just not heard. And then the problem is the man wants to fix the issue and the woman just wants to be heard. And then all this conflict's going on and they can't figure out, well, what's going on? I can't figure out why we don't listen to each other. I haven't heard a word she says. And then we get in all kind of trouble in our marriages and we wonder how it happened. Women need to be heard. Men need to have the issues fixed. So ladies, help them with the issues. Men, help them to be heard. Okay? Can you hear it? That's the key to great, help them not to get upset. Now, some men will say, well, I know her like a book. Well, maybe you haven't read that chapter. Read that book if it's a girl. Women want to be heard, and they really do. They need to be heard, or they're going to get upset. That's just the way God wires them. Okay, that's the way, and they're perfectly and wonderfully made. How many know you're perfectly and wonderfully made? I mean, most men, we just don't want to deal with you. I don't want to cause any, and then we wonder, then we end up in counseling and wonder how we got there because we didn't listen. It's the number one reason for divorce. Okay? Now, if we hear God or someone, it's because we intentionally wanted it that way. Isn't it the truth? Think about it. You intentionally wanted it that way. Okay? Plan times to listen to your wife, plan times to listen to your husband, and plan times to listen to your children. Your children have a lot to say. They really do. They really have a lot to say. Okay? Now the husband's the head, and I tell men that we need to take the role in listening. We need to be the one that says, okay, I'm going to start the listening. I'm going to really plan and listen to what you have to say. And if you don't, guess what? The wife will find someone that will listen to her. Can you hear that, guys? All the husbands? They really will. So make sure that you're the guy. Everyone, the guy, husband say, I'm the guy. I'm the guy. Amen. I'm going to listen to her. I really will. Okay. You like that, don't you? She saw him put his hand up. I saw that. Okay. So you're putting your hands up. Good. Okay. We're going to intentionally listen. And I tell husbands, here's what you can say. How does that make you feel? Okay. Women love to share feelings. They really. How many ladies like to share your feelings? Put your hands up. Yeah, there we go. They want to tell you how they feel. But if you don't listen to them, they'll share their feelings with someone else. And it might be another man. Hopefully it's just another lady. You know what I mean? But men, we need to be able to say, tell me how you feel. Okay? It's sort of like priming a pump. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, because maybe we don't have the greatest listening skills, maybe you try to prime the pump and he doesn't really want to hear me. And then a lot of men will say, boy, she just keeps nagging me. She's not nagging us. She's trying to build the communication. Can you hear it? It's not nagging. Everyone say it's not nagging. It really isn't. It really isn't nagging. It's sharing your feelings. Okay? Often children feel that their parents are not listening. That's where we end up with the generation gap. How many know what I'm talking about here? You know, my dad doesn't listen to me. He doesn't care. And that's the generation gap, they call it. Okay? And it's really, the generation gap is a failure to listen. Okay? Like a lot of times I'll sit my girls down and I'll say, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to say anything? And I try to, now Hannah's getting older. She says, I don't really want to talk. But Sarah still talks to me. Hannah still talks. You know what I'm saying? But we need to give them time so they can get it off their chest. We need to help them with their listening. Now, a lot of times you feel like your kids aren't listening, okay? Children who are listened to by their parents are much more apt to listen to the instruction of the parent. If they feel like you're listening to them, they're more apt to listen to you. You know, I had a friend and he said to me, he said, my dad never talked to me. I said, what do you mean your dad never talked to you? He said, he never talked to me. I said, what? Didn't he ever yell at you? No. Didn't he ever say anything negative to you? No, never talked to me. I said, what? I couldn't imagine. Not even being yelled at? He just didn't even give him the time of day. Isn't that sad? I mean, never talk to his son. I want to encourage you, dads, and give your kids encouraging words. Every child needs to be encouraged. Every wife needs to be encouraged. Every husband needs to be encouraged. How many like when you're encouraged? Put your hand up. Do you like being encouraged? Yeah. How many like being discouraged? No, not really. We don't, okay? So I want to encourage you, listen intentionally. Everyone say, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Okay, let him hear the truth, and the truth will set us free. Do you intentionally listen? Do you set times up to listen? Do you set times up to listen to your spouse? Do you set times up to listen to your boyfriend? Do you set times to listen to your girlfriend? Do you spend time to listen to your children? Do you spend time to listen to your other workers? Okay, people want to be heard. Okay, what about listening to your pastor? What about listening to your boss? Do you spend time? What about listening to your parents? Do you spend time? I tell you, my mom has a lot of wisdom. I've learned that over the last years. She really does. And I love to listen to her stories about what she did when she was little. You know, it's great stuff. You know what I'm saying? And the older we get, the more wisdom we have. Have you noticed that? And if you can tap into older people, you're going to glean wisdom from them. You really will. Okay? Listen, whatever your job is, listen to the older guys, you know, at your work. They've been doing it longer. They know what's going on. You know, the older ladies, they've been down the road on this thing. They have wisdom in this area. Learn to listen. You know, I worked with a guy, and he never would listen. And one of the older guys, he was there, and I was forget how many years I was doing this, and I was probably there at least 7 years or 8 years. And I knew a lot, but I didn't know it all. How many know I'm talking? It takes a lifetime to learn all of it. And I was there, but Jesse, he did it for 30 years. He knew a lot. And if he would say, hey, you know what are you doing? It looks like you're going to, and I'd say, what do you mean? He goes, I don't think if you do it this way, it'll go better. And I said, yeah, what's that way? And I'd listen to him. Well, this other guy, Pete, I'd see him over there. He was a new guy. And I saw him doing something. I knew if he did it the way he was doing it, the way he was clamping the thing down, it was going to twist it and kink it. And when he cut the metal, it was going to bend it. It wouldn't lay flat. And I went over, oh man, he's going to mess it up. Just said, don't talk to him. I said, Jess, he's going to mess it up when he does this. He says, I'm going to tell you right now, don't talk to him. And I said, well, Jesse, he needs help. I'm just going to go over and talk to him. And I walked over to the guy and said, hey, Pete, how's it going? To try to buddy up with him. I said, you know, if you do it that way, it's not going to go so good. He started F-bombing me. And I thought, whoa. I walked back and Jess says, told you so. And he says, he never listens. Just let him scrap it. He learns by his mistakes. I mean, no, you can learn by mistakes. But if you intentionally listen to people, you don't have to make the mistake. How many know why we have history books? You know why we have history books? So we learn from our history. Okay? Now you can read your history books and repeat your troubles again, or you can learn from your history books and learn not to make that same mistake. Can you hear it? So I want to encourage you, don't be a Pete, be a Jesse. Okay? Listen to people. Intentionally listen. And you know what? You reap what you sow. How many would want people to listen to you? Then listen to them. Listening is so important. Now the world says what comes around goes around, but I want to encourage you to listen. Now my second point is listen attentively. Everyone say that. Listen attentively. See, it's one thing to listen intentionally, and after you listen, you want to be intentional about your listening. Then you need to be attentive to what they say. Because you can intentionally want to hear someone, but if you're not attentive, you're going to just get part of it. How many know what I'm talking about? You just get a little bit of it. You might not get it all. I want to read a verse to you over in Psalm 34, verse 15. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. That's you. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. And his ears are attentive to their words. See, God is very attentive to what your words say. The Bible also says he inclines his ear to hear your words. Whenever you start praying, he goes like this. He turns his ear your way. How many are glad for that? Isn't that nice? Every time you start telling God all your troubles or all your praises or whatever, he goes, oh, keep it coming. It doesn't matter if it's negative or positive with God because he loves you so much. He'll take it all. And that's the way we need to be with other people. We need to be attentive when they talk. If you want to be a great communicator, okay? You know, when my girls were little, and we'd be anywhere or wherever, and I'd hear one of them start crying, I knew that voice. How many know I'm talking about? That's moms and dads. You know your baby. You know, because you're attentive, you'd hear that crying. I mean, I was used to hearing the, ah, and they would yell, Daddy, and I knew it was me. You know what I mean? And it could be a group of kids, but you know your child's voice, no matter how many of it is, because you're attentive to that voice, because you've learned to listen. And that's the way we need to be with other people. We need to learn to be attentive when they listen, when we're listening. Yeah, go ahead, tell me. How many have ever listened to someone and you're thinking about other things? How attentive are we? Not at all. Or how many have ever had someone share their troubles with you and you're thinking, you know, maybe it's someone you just have an argument. You have an argument with someone and you're going to do the one-upping thing. You're thinking about, well, I want to say this. Well, as soon as she takes a breath, I'm going to say this. How many have ever done that besides me? How much attentive listening are we doing that? Absolutely zero. All you're thinking about is what you want to say and you just want to blast them or whatever. You need to listen attentively. Okay. We know God pays attention to us because he loves us. That's why he does, isn't it? Because he loves us. Okay? Your husband, your wife, your sons, your daughters, your friends need to know the same thing. They need to know that you love them. Okay? Because when you pay attention to someone, it's a sign you really love them, isn't it? It's a sign you really care. Now I got a little breakdown. I got a couple examples here of attentive listening. For husbands, we must take time to listen to our wife. Without defense of our position or explanation of our perspective. Let me say it again. As husbands, without being defensive of our position, you know, that's what always happens. We start getting, and men start getting defensive, okay? Or they think they need to explain, and they get worked up. Now, wives must give her husband a chance to tell his point of view without becoming accusatory or upset emotionally. See, ladies get upset emotionally or they get accusatory. Men, what happens with men is they get defensive and they want to explain their way. Now children, I got another one. Children need to be attentive listening also without belittling or condemning. How many have ever seen children talk to each other? They'll start belittling each other. How much belittling? It doesn't work at all. Okay? Now, when we fail to pay attention, when we fail to listen, we're perceived as, he doesn't love me, or she doesn't care. Isn't that the truth? When you don't attentive listen. Okay? Now here's the other thing. Most men and most women, okay, women have twice as many words as men, usually. Okay? They really do. Okay, now a man will go to work, he'll use up a lot of his words. He'll use a lot of his words up at work. Then he comes home, and he sits down at the chair. He wants to read maybe the newspaper, or nowadays he wants to get on his phone. You know, he'll want to get on his phone, or he'll want to watch the TV. Now his wife comes in, half of her words are gone for the day. She's got another half to go. And he's down here at 10%. And she comes in the room, she goes, hey, how'd it go today? Oh, okay. And she starts talking, and he stops listening. And she starts talking, and he's not being attentive because all his words are gone. His words are gone. Okay, he's got 10% left. You know, I love you, I care about you, good night. You know, he sits at the couch. Most guys, what happens, they sit at the couch, they grunt. How many know the grunting husbands? How many men do that besides me? Come on now. We do the, okay. You know, short little ones, you know. Okay. It's because our words are gone. And a lot of ladies, they think, well, he just doesn't care. Well, it's not that he doesn't care, it's just his words are gone. See, now for the men, we need to save our words up. Okay? We need to save our words up so when we come home, we have 50% of our words left. So we can talk back and let them know that we're listening, being attentive to their words. And one of the greatest ways to show love when someone's talking to you, ask them questions. You know, how'd that make you feel? What were you thinking when that happened? Oh man, all of a sudden, here they come. And give them eye contact. How many like when someone looks you in the eyes when they're talking? I had this one friend, his dad, Al Resch. Remember him, Mom? When you would talk to Al, now eye contact is so important when you want an attentive listen. He would talk like, you'd be talking to me, he'd be like doing this number. Looking over, off to the side. I used to step over, you know, to get in his eyesight. I said, he must have a bad eye or something. I didn't know any better. You know? Okay, where is he? He's over here now. No, he's back over here. It was the weirdest thing. He'd be like looking at me like he's looking off onto outer space or something. I thought it was the weirdest thing. How many have ever met someone like that? How do you feel when they're talking? It's weird, isn't it? It's like, I don't think he's listening. He can't even give me good eye contact. Attentive listeners give great eye contact. They look right in your eyes. And one thing I've learned is to look people in the eyes, you know? I mean, I'm the kind of guy, I like a firm handshake too. How many have ever had a person give you one of those weak little, you know, it's like they don't really care or something. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's just me or what, but it's like weird stuff. But I want to encourage you, when someone talks to you, look them in the eyes. And don't give them the grunts. Give them, how did it make you feel? What were you thinking when that happened? Wow. And just keep asking questions. Man, you're priming the pump. They're gonna think, wow, that guy really loves me. She really cares about me. I'm telling you, this is 101 on communication. Okay? Now, attention is a gift we give others. It's the highest compliment that you can give someone when you give them your attention. It really is. Okay? Another definition for listening is attend closely. That's what it is. Attend closely. Okay? Now let me give you some barriers to attentive listening. Okay? No quality time. I just don't have time to listen to you right now. I'm so busy. I'm sorry. I got everything and anything to. No quality time. You have to have quality time to be a good listener. Okay, here's another one. Distractions. How many know distractions when you're trying to listen? Oh man, if something's going on in my house and my wife's trying to talk to me, I just can't, I can't take it. You know what I mean? If the TV's on, I'm going to be, what was that? And I'll keep looking over TV. You know what I'm saying? I get very distracted. And a distraction is one of the torments to good listening. You know, the other day I was watching Penn State. I like Penn State. Okay, and I was watching Penn State on TV, and my wife said, I really need to talk to you about something. I was thinking, oh, okay. So I turned the TV off, and we went upstairs to the bedroom and sat on the bed, and she shared all of the things that were going on. She was struggling with it. And I just sat there and listened. I was thinking, I'm not going to see the game. Being distracted. You know what I mean? I was getting distracted. I only saw the kickoff. But sooner or later, I got to the point where I said, the game's not important. You know what I mean? My wife is more important. I'm going to be attentive here and really listen to her. And she started talking, and I kept listening and listening. And she got it all off her chest by halftime. Okay? Now I go over there, it's halftime report. I'm thinking, great, she could have kept going. But the thing of it is, she felt heard. She felt better. You know, something going on that she really had on her heart. She wanted to get it off her heart. And for me, if I minister to her, my day goes better. How many know I'm talking about? But if I would have said to her, can you wait till the game's over? Oh my gosh. I mean, that would be like a lead balloon trying to float that. You know what I'm saying? It just wouldn't have worked. But I wanted to be attentive to her. I sat down with her, we talked, and she felt so much. And here's how you know when someone really gets it off their chest, when they do one of these numbers. How many know that one? When you get them to that point there, now they're done. Okay, now they've heard, they felt heard, they felt like you were listening, they felt like you cared. Okay, so when you get that little breather, you know you're doing good. Here, and then I talked about poor eye contact. Okay, and here's another one. Not asking questions when someone talks. It's so important just to ask them questions. You know, because when you start asking questions, they feel like you really care. You know what I mean? Wow, he wants me to go deeper on this. Or she really wants to hear this. And then they feel so listened to. And then they feel so much better. They feel just great about it. Okay, so ask questions. Okay, now some people have the problem of dominating the conversation. How many know what I'm talking about? Now, if you're that person, because I like to talk too, but if you're the person that likes to dominate the conversation, remember, one mouth, two ears. Try to listen twice as much as the words you speak, okay? And they'll feel like, wow, he really cares about me. She really does. They really care, okay? And some people dominate either by the volume of their words, okay, or the volume of their voice. How many know what I'm talking about here? How many have ever had a person talk real loud? And here's how you can really get people to listen to you. Is just start talking lower. Just talk lower. Just say it a little lower. And all they'll say, what'd you say? And when they say, what'd you say, now they're listening. Okay, just don't try to be so loud. Just say it real soft. Say it with the right tone. Okay? They'll listen better to you too. Okay? Or by spending time thinking about what the other person's saying, don't even do that. When you're one-upping, you know, have you ever talked to a person and after you get done talking with them, they bring up a completely different subject as soon as you take a breath. And you're thinking, what the heck is going on with this guy? Is she not right there? Or something going on here? You can't figure it out. Because they're off on a different subject. How many know I'm talking about here? And how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel like they're even listening? Not at all. Okay, so stop changing subjects when someone's talking to you. If you want to be an attentive listener, okay? Now, don't interrupt someone when they're talking. How many like when people interrupt you when you're talking? Not one of us. Okay, this indicates disrespectful and an unwillingness to listen. The interpretation is, causes anger, it causes frustration, and it causes discouragement. So if you want a person discouraged, just interrupt them when they're talking. They really feel discouraged. And you don't want that person to feel discouraged. You want them to feel encouraged. Okay? They learn it's less painful to avoid conversations at all. So now they don't even talk to you anymore because they know that when they talk to you, you're just going to interrupt them anyhow and give your own story. So they said, well, when I even talk to her, she doesn't listen anyhow. And then you end up in divorce court, or you end up not having that friend anymore. Do you listen attentively to people? I want to read another story. I have a little story for you too. This is a pastor. His name is Robert Fisher. And he wrote this book. It's called Quick to Listen and Slow to Speak. And he has this title, it's one chapter, and I want to just read a little bit of it to you. And what was going on in his life is he was in seminary school at the time, in college. And his girlfriend lived 160 miles away. And he had to sell his car to afford to pay for college. So he sold his car, and he would hitchhike every weekend to her house. Okay, so that's the story. And he read this, I want to just read this. It says, right after I went away to college to study for ministry, someone gave me a book by Dale Carnegie. How many have ever heard of him? It's really good. It says, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's his book. If you really want to read a book that's really good, it's the bestseller. It was the bestseller of all times, of course, except for the Bible. Okay, the Bible always wins every year. How many have ever noticed that? It always wins every year. Okay, could be pastors buying them and giving them, but the Bible was number one. It turned out to be a very popular book, reportedly selling more copies in the English language than any other book but the Bible. The chapter that interested me the most was entitled, An Easy Way to Become a Good Communicationalist. To my surprise, Carnegie gave a rule that was just the opposite of what I supposed to be true. To become a good communicationalist, he said, one must first become a good listener. Others are not nearly as interested in what you have to say as they are and what they want to say to us. It's a paradoxical idea. According to Carnegie, good communication is defined more by how well we listen than how well we speak. The school I was attending at the time was about, 250 miles from where my girlfriend lived. Since I had to sell my car to pay for college tuition, the only way I could see Mary, her name was Mary, for a few weeks was to hitchhike my way down Highway 95 from Fresno to Southern California. After reading Carnegie's book, I decided that on my next trip to Southern California, I would put into practice the rule of good communication with every person that picked me up. Early the next Saturday morning, I was out on the highway. A car finally pulled over. The driver said he could take me as far as Bakersfield, about 100 miles down the road. That's pretty good, isn't it? About 100 miles down the road. As he began the journey together, he started talking, and I started listening. To my surprise, as I paid close attention to what he was saying, I felt myself genuinely interested and involved in the conversation. Occasionally, I would make a comment and ask a pertinent question, but I never asked. But I was never asked, and I never gave any of my own information. The time passed quickly. As soon as we were at Bakersfield, we came to the crossroad where my friend was to turn off. Instead of deciding to turn to another main intersection 10 miles away, farther, he decided to go. Okay, the guy's going to take him another 10 miles because he's listening. Okay, and he thought the chances of me getting a ride would be better. As we traveled on, he kept talking and I kept listening. When we arrived at the new destination, he remarked that he had never seen fewer cars on the road. I might have a difficult time getting picked up here. And he said, so he would take me to the base of Ridge Route, and where the mountain range separated the central and southern part of the state. That was another 15 miles. He kept talking, I kept listening. As we came to Ridge Route, he had to make a decision. Was he going to take me over the mountain to Southern California, about 75 more miles? Or was he going to let me out and turn around and go back? I can't believe this traffic, he said. I know I don't have anything else more important to do today. I'm going to take you over the mountain. I couldn't believe the traffic. I couldn't believe that this man was what he was doing for me. An hour or so later, we arrived at San Fernando Valley. Tell me, where is this town your girlfriend lives in? He asked. I told him, oh, it's about another 60 miles or so, right off the main highway. What's the difference, he said. I've come this far, I might as well take you the rest of the way. During all our time together, he never asked me anything about myself, not even my name. He had told me about his family, his business, his dreams, his ambitions. I forgot about trying to impress him by telling him about myself. I found it interesting and stimulating to learn so much about another person. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. He took me right to Mary's front door. Unbelievable. I thanked him profusely for this kindness and his generosity. As I got out as I got out and was about to close the car door, he stopped me. Just a minute, young man. Before you go, I want to tell you something. I make it a habit to pick up hitchhikers. I like to learn about other people. I enjoy good conversation. He paused and became very serious. I know you're young, he said, but I want you to know you are absolutely one of the finest communicationalists I've ever met. I learned a lesson of life that day I will never forget. I learned the joy of listening, but perhaps more importantly, I learned the value of controlling my own tongue for the positive purpose. I want to tell you right now, people want to be heard. Can you hear that today? And I really want to encourage you today. You can be a great listener. You can be one of the greatest if you're attentive to listening. But if you're not attentive to listening like this young man was, other people will think, not very good at communication. Okay, do you do attentive listening to people? What about your husband or wife? What about your children? What about your enemies? What about your friends? What about your parents? Do you give good eye contact when you talk to people? Do you let distractions creep in? Okay? Do you do all the talking? Do you interrupt people when they're talking? I want to encourage you, if you can control those couple things, you're going to be an attentive listener. Can you hear it? Okay, therefore we must listen and with the right motives and the right attitudes. The first one I talked today was about listening intentionally. Today I also talked about listening attentively, and I got a couple more for next week. But I want to encourage you, you can do it. Look at the person next to you and say, I can do this. I'm going to listen. And I want to encourage you, if you learn to listen, you can be a great communicationalist. You really can. Well, I want to pray for you. Father, we just thank you right now for each person here today, that you're going to help each and every one of us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. You've given us 2 ears, twice as much listening as speaking, Lord. Help us to be those listeners that will listen to people, our husbands, our wives, our parents. People want to be heard. People need to be heard, Lord. Help us to listen to our children. Help us in all these areas, we pray. Help us, Jesus, because on our own, we won't. But with you, we can do all things, because all things are possible for those who believe. In Jesus' name, I pray that you bless each person here, and they're coming and going. Bless them. I guess they're going to get home safe today. They don't have to worry. We had people who couldn't make it today because they thought they were going to be in a major storm. But Father, we thank you, Lord, you even ceased that. And we thank you and praise your name in Jesus' name. God bless you today. Greet